Chronic illnesses and long-term sicknesses are actually realities for a lot of employees. And for those managing conditions like diabetes, arthritis, sometimes cancer recovery or asthma, balancing work and health can actually be a daily struggle because these are individuals that constantly need to take care of their health and have a routine, a regimen that they need to adhere to in order to live a fulfilling and healthy life. And for employers, creating a supportive environment for these workers is not just a legal obligation, but it's also the right thing to do. But it can also lead to a more engaged and productive team. And that's what we're looking at today in the cubicle, how we can manage chronic illnesses in the workplace and how both employers and employees can make that environment one that everyone can thrive in. We have on the line with us Yangeni Chendela, who's an HR manager and author, helping us unpack this particular conversation. Yangeni, thank you so much for your time. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Good to be back here.
Oh, it's good to have you back as well to engage on this. Being ill just in general isn't great, especially when we think about our work. Many people, when you even have the common cold, you have to think about, okay, how many leave days do I have? Which leave day should I fill in? What sort of meetings and work do I have that I need to email and postpone about? So just even one illness a year or two illnesses a year can actually be quite detrimental to, your work schedule. But having a chronic illness is something completely different because these are individuals that constantly have to think around their health. Do people even disclose, or do they have to disclose the fact that they have a chronic illness to their employers?
Okay, this is very interesting and very meaningful conversation. Maybe just to start with, uh, the chronic illness should not be a barrier to somebody's career advancement. This is both to individuals and organizations. We all have a role to play in this. But I like what you've said there, that even a single day sometimes can affect us because we don't know if I should take leave or I should tell my employer that this is happening. So to begin with, we would say nobody wishes to be unwell. Worse still, nobody would wish to be chronically ill to an extent that constantly asking for permission from the employer. So it presents us a very interesting opportunity where we have employees that are found in these situations. And these are delicate situations because some of the conditions that people have may not even wish to share. But from the HR point of view, you also can't just be seeing a person in and out. You want to know what is happening, what is making you not to be around. So it's a very interesting conversation. And for me, the beginning is for us to realize and appreciate that nobody wishes to be unwell. And if that is the case, how can we create a platform where we are accommodating enough as an employer so that people feel comfortable and people feel safe to begin with?
Let's speak about
I know
that.
you've mentioned some of
Yeah.
you've mentioned some of the chronic diseases like diabetes and other things.
Yeah.
But for me, even just as we start, there are things that we call invisible chronic illnesses that many of us tend to oversee because they are not visible. Things like, let's say, blood pressure. You won't know if I have blood pressure or not.
Yeah.
It's easier for you to see somebody who's got diabetes because maybe they'll be slimming down, but somebody who has blood pressure, you won't see. Somebody who's got a mental or depression problem, you won't be able to see. These are invisible chronic illnesses.
True.
So the question will be, how can we as employers accommodate those chronic illnesses that we can see and those that are not visible to the human eye?
That's a good point, right? That you're making there around the invisible chronic diseases. How important is it that also the employee comes out and says, you know what, this is something that I have, and where do they go if they divulge that information, because it's personal information and you don't want it in wrong hands?
Okay, this is now a very difficult thing. I should tell you, I've been being as an HR for the last 16 years. There's always a thin line. In as much as people, you can tell them there's confidentiality within this organization, but there's just a limit to how much information you want to share with your institution. So for me, the beginning of all is your human resource department. You cannot have a chronic problem. For instance, you've got asthma or you've got high blood pressure, and you do not disclose that to your employers because certain conditions, for instance, those going into winter now, we know that our colleagues with asthma, this is not a good season for them. So if you've never disclosed, and on that particular day you prefer to work from home because you have an attack and the employer is not aware, it becomes very difficult. So the beginning for me is trust the systems. Your HR should be your most trusted department that you discuss. Remember when we are doing recruitments, we have what we call the prior tests that people conduct, especially if you're working for the mines, for the production companies, for where people are needed a lot of hours. We have to do certain tests. So those tests sometimes also review certain chronic conditions that people come with. But along the way now, we have these what we're calling the invisible illnesses that sometimes you may just want to keep it to yourself, but there is always a time that you may want to share with your HR so that there will be more understanding when you constantly keep asking for those off days.
Yeah. Yangeni, people are scared though because we've all heard some of those horror stories, right? That if someone has a chronic illness, that person thinks maybe my employer will think of me as a liability. And then when it's time to give out promotions, they might favor someone else for a promotion rather than me because I have to take some time off work to make sure that I'm healthy because of my chronic illness. There are things that I have to do and engage in that maybe somebody else will be readily willing to be there in the meetings that I won't be able to be there in, on the days of work where I'll have to skip and go to my doctor's appointment. And maybe that's why people aren't disclosing. They think that they won't be able to climb up in their career because of their chronic illness. Do you think this is an unwarranted fear?
I do agree. I support you 100% that this fear is normal. And remember, the people who run this organization are human like you and I. So there's always an element of subjectivity. Maybe just to give you an example, I have faced this situation where we are recruiting, okay? And, this time we're doing online, you're interviewing people online, and you're up with the candidate. Just when you've offered them a job, they come to sign up. Then you realize that they are an expecting mother and it's visible enough. They're in the seventh month and they never mentioned during the whole process. And you've already committed as an institution that you're offering a job to this person. So the question will be, do you proceed with that offer or do you rescind?
What do you do?
And I'll tell
that's an interesting example. What do you do?
I'll tell you from practical example. A few years ago, I was in that situation, and as much as it was delicate, we proceeded to hire this person. There was an element in the employee where we felt they were not honest enough to tell us, but as lucky enough, the job they were supposed to do allowed them to sit. It wasn't a strenuous job where they're going to. But that situation is a true example of some of the things, assuming this person presented this situation in the first interview phase. Do you think you and I were going to hire this person?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm unable to answer that question now because a lot of people are answering. At least I'm cited for discrimination and other things.
Yeah.
But there are certain situations I tell employees that sometimes you may need to keep it to yourself until you have papers in your hands, because you never know how people can react once you tell them the situation. Even when you know that yourself that I can manage this, but whenever people just hear, oh, somebody's got asthma, somebody has got BP, somebody has got diabetes, the people who don't manage these things may think, oh, no way, this person will be a liability. Or our medical bills will be going up.
Well, it's a tricky one. Stay with us on the line, Yangeni. We're going to take a short break and then we'll come back and really see what the employers need to do to make sure that there's a good relationship between their employees, especially those who present with chronic illnesses, those both that are visible and those that are invisible. It's 20 minutes past 10 Central Africa time. We'll continue this conversation after the break.
Heritage Month is a time to remember where we come from and celebrate where we are going. Channel Africa. Catch us on DSTV Channel 802. In this episode of Channel Africa Conversations, Peter talks to Dr. Tulisile Buddha, an academic, author, and an expert in indigenous knowledge systems. Join us for a compelling discussion on preserving African languages and traditions in the digital era. Dr. Tulisile unpacks the role of educators, explorers, and how technologies like AI can support cultural preservation, and challenges us to rethink how we honor African heritage. You can find the episode on YouTube, SABC Plus, and on our website, channelafrica.co.za. This episode is a must-listen for educators, creators, and change makers across the continent. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Keeping you on the know and on the move.
Hey, it's 21 minutes past 10 o'clock Central African time. You are listening to Channel Africa, where you get news, information, and entertainment from an African perspective. And we are also live on our socials. You can find us on our Facebook page titled Channel Africa. And also you can find us on YouTube. We've got a YouTube page titled Channel Africa using the handle at Channel Africa 1 as well. Go there. You can also see our guest who's joining us. Looking at our live, I see Mayeso Ulia is joining us from Malawi, saying my vote, my choice. Mayeso, hope all the elections go well in your country there, and thank you for joining us there on our live stream. Well, we continue the conversation in the cubicle feature, looking at chronic illness, which is invisible at times in the workplace, and we speak, how do you handle it as a manager? How do you handle it as an employee? And we're getting some great tools on how to deal with this situation from our guest. Yangeni Chendela is joining us once again on the show, HR manager and author. Yangeni, I was thinking about the workplace environment has now found itself in the future. Most people are, not most, but some people are doing online jobs, right? And those jobs, they not necessarily necessitate you to have a face-to-face relationship with your bosses or even your colleagues. Sometimes you're isolated in another country and you have all that you have is that computer. And then you get sick and you get ill and you've got this chronic illness that you're trying to navigate, right? But then you have to go to the doctor and you can see it's time for me to be online. With these kind of jobs, how do we handle it? Because it makes things even more complicated because the relationship between employee and employer is so different.
Yeah. I like that example because it presents two challenges there. One, you're not where the employer should see you, so that physically, probably they can even confirm that our colleague hasn't been well. And again, you're at home and that relationship hasn't been built. But what we need to know, you and I, that we are all guided by the Convention number 111, which is Discrimination, Employment and Occupation. That's ILO Convention number 111. This particular legislation prevents any discrimination across the world. And also further to that is another act by the ILO, that should be 159, okay? Also this one talks over disabled persons. So as employers, we need first to be aware that we need to create an inclusive working environment because we are mandated to do so by the Convention number 111. Now, Westmore, given the example that you've given, I'm assuming that post-COVID now, every HR should have put in place policies that support how do we treat people who are working from home in an event that they're not even available, especially people that are chronically unwell. Our understanding how we as an organization, when we have colleagues that constantly have to visit the hospital because they've got certain appointments that they cannot miss. At the same time, they are expected to deliver at work. So there are all these challenges that this situation presents us. But for me, the first thing that we as managers and HRs need to do is to ensure that we've created an environment that supports employees to be off work when they are not well without feeling left out or without feeling they're a burden to the employer. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have. Whenever a person says, I'm visiting the doctor, this week they went there, next week they go there, even the co-workers, they name you actually.
Yeah.
They name you that, oh, we know this person. They are always like that. In some of the conditions that people go through, they just can't tell you. Okay, that's why I remember, especially when you're looking at invisible chronic illnesses, people have got gyno problems. Okay, maybe they are trying to conceive and they just can't tell you that I'm going through this thing, but you're expecting them to be reporting to you every now and then. So for me, I feel we should create a supportive environment where people feel they can present their issues without feeling left out. And policies become very critical. Do you have a policy that supports? If I come to you, Benjamin, you're my supervisor, I tell you I'm unwell.
Sure.
I need to visit the doctor. That word should be sufficient enough, because even us as an HR, when we are asking for your sick note, by the way, we are not allowed to be given the details of what is contained on the sick note.
Yeah.
The doctor just telling us you are unwell is sufficient. Unlike, when somebody says they've got a stomach ache, oh, can we see? Oh, come to the office, we'll prove.
Let's see your stomach and see what your stomach ache looks like. But how can individuals advocate for themselves in the workplace while trying to avoid like retaliation or stigma, either from their employees or even their fellow co-workers, as you said, because the co-workers also will be complaining like, yeah, we have so much workload and this one is always off work.
Sure.
And all the workload, is on our hands. And I'm sure they just like to like hang out and do nothing. We don't actually know what they do with their time. Or maybe they have a doctor that's writing them illegal sick notes. I should find out from them who that doctor is. And so there is a lot of stigma in the workplace when it comes to people with chronic illnesses. How do you stand up for yourself and how do you advocate for yourself, both to your employer, but also in the work environment of your colleagues?
Okay, unfortunately, the truth of the matter is that we will always encounter some negative reactions around these things. So for me, there may not be one formula that we can prescribe, but what we need is an individual needs to be calm and professional enough to handle that situation. But also, I've had situations where you need to be a very progressive employee. Of course, you know that you will, at 10 hours to 12 hours, you'll be visiting your doctor. You need to know that 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., you need to recover that time. So even as you go to your supervisor to tell them, I will be visiting the doctor at around this time, but I plan to recover these hours by, you give them a plan.
Sure.
Equally, your friends won't feel it.
Yeah.
If I know that I have to be away from 14 hours,
Okay.
I need to tell my supervisor, I will be visiting the doctor, but the work that I was supposed to do at 14, I already did it before I came home, or I'll do it at 5. So you as an individual as well, you need to provide, that supportive environment where you are showing your initiatives and, options. Don't just become a victim now.
Yeah.
Okay, now me, I'm sick.
Yeah.
Now you want to seek sympathy from others. Because remember, there's a limit. There's a maximum people can tolerate want to be away from work. Because at the end of the day, organization needs to run.
All right.
And if all of us were unwell, nobody will get paid. So you as an employee, you should handle it in such a manner. I've had very strong employees, you know that they are unwell, but they will come and report and they'll ask you, can I knock off early? But I'll be able to do that 18 hours.
Okay.
So there are always these.
Sure, Yangeni, we have to wrap it up. Sure, sorry to cut you off there. But I hear what you're surmising. It's also the responsibility of employee also to be reasonable, right? Yangeni, where can we find you on the socials as we wrap things up?
Okay, so I'm found on LinkedIn, Yangeni Chendela, the HR are making a difference. I should mention that they have got over 66,000 followers.
Oh man, can you give me some? I'll pay you. Can I buy some from you?
As we speak here, I already shared this link, so you should expect to get some of those from there. Otherwise, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure, Yangeni. Thank you for joining us. That's Yangeni Chendela, HR manager and author. Hey, in the meanwhile, as we go to our latest sports news, visit our X handle at Channel Africa 1 and give us your thoughts on this In the Cubicle feature. We're asking, what's the most important step employers can take to better support those who have chronic illnesses? At Channel Africa 1 on X. Right now, let's move on and get our latest sports from Figile Lingwati.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.